and I am not filling in for her.
We can just skip topic one and go there.
They do not have microphones in this room.
Although I think we're talking
The next person who decides to stick their spot in the face.
They do not have microphones in this room. So just, it seems like everybody else is quiet today.
I can hear you just how loud it is. But if I have to, I'll just I'm not allowed to talk around.
And I'll just sit back there and I'll let you know. Let me go find Florence. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start now that we have all of our panelists here. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jill Hurston. I'm with Synerzip. I'm the marketing director. I'm the one who's been bombarding you all with emails. So I would apologize for that, but I got you here, so I'm glad. We're very happy to see you. This whole session is very interactive, so feel free to get up, go get some more food, go get another drink. You got a question, belt it out. These guys would love to answer them as we go. What was that?
No food throwing.
No food throwing, please. Parking. If you haven't had your parking ticket validated, they will do that at the front desk here on this floor before you leave. And so what it does, it reduces the price to $7 if you entered after 5 and leave before 10. So if you entered at 4:49, it won't work. But I don't think anybody did, except maybe us. Trying to think of what else. I will be sending out the slides, but probably not until Monday, because each day that we're delivering this, we're tweaking it just a little bit to make it a little bit better. What else am I missing? Again, I appreciate you guys coming. So last week was Agile2019 conference, and that was in Washington, D.C. And the 5 of us went, and we were sponsors of the conference, but also went to a lot of the sessions. And that's when we bring our top 10 here to you at these events. And we've done this for, what, about 10 years now. And so we're really happy to be in Austin. So now I'd like to introduce everybody. We have Vinayak Joglekar. He is our CTO, and he came here all the way from Pune, India. He is over our development center in India, which has, what, about 500 developers now. And so he's loving all that. Then we have Florence Lowe. She is our COO, and she is based in Dallas, which is where our U.S. headquarters is.
Which is not as cool as Austin, but
We try.
we get by.
And then Mike Watson is our VP of Engineering, and he is located here in Austin. And if at any time, like I said, if you want to ask any questions or meet with these guys, just let us know. They're always happy to talk with everybody. And of course, most of you know our CEO, Hemant Elhens. He is taking a break this year from delivering the session, but for good reason.
I think you'll enjoy it more.
She didn't mean that.
So he's just taking a little break this year, and he'll be here to answer any questions also. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Florence, who's going to get things started. Oh, one last thing. I'm sorry. Capital Factory is live streaming tonight's session. So it's going to be on their YouTube channel and probably right now. So make sure you smile nicely when you ask a question or whatnot.
The camera is there.
Yeah.
So if you want to ask a question and mention your startup or the company you work for, please do so.
And so that also means it will be recorded. So you could, if you missed anything, you could watch it later on demand or forward it to somebody if you think a certain section of it would be of interest to them. So with that, now I'm turning it over to Florence.
Thanks, Jill. Thank you. And thank you. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. We'll get started right away. And before I get into my first takeaway, I'm going to share my pre-first takeaway, which is apparently this is the thing to do. This is what they do in conferences. So take pictures of, yes, thank you, yes, okay, and we're an equal opportunity company here. Thank you.
Take my face.
Yes, okay, thank you so much for that. So what's the first takeaway? So like Jill said, we've been as a company going to Agile, the annual Agile conference for the last 10 years. We've been doing this for the last 5 years. This is our contribution to the Agile and Texas community. We come here and do this grueling drive we do this all day in Dallas, and then we drive this morning to Austin, and then tomorrow early morning we're going to be driving down to Houston. So for those of you who are here for the first time. So with that, the first thing that I wanted to share that I thought was really good was the first takeaway is, every battle is won before it is fought. We all know this. But too often we get caught up in just fighting that battle that we forget this. And to illustrate this, I picked out 2 talks at the conference that I thought was really good. One was a talk on team rooms that rock, given by Kathy Aragon and Alfred Lorber of Sandia National Labs. And the next one is about team agreements by Alex Cannon, who is a coach at USAA right here in Texas. So why is this important for Agile software companies? It's about people. We put people and collaboration before processes and anything else. And at the end of the day, we work over our 15 years of Synerzip's being in existence. We've worked with over 150 companies. Hemant, Mike, Vinayak, and I have personally been involved with other startups ourselves. And at any given point in time, we are working with about 50 companies. And all the issues that we see across all these different groups end up coming down to how well we work together as teams. So people. I thought this was really good. It was worth highlighting. And I'm going to read it because I thought every word was so good. A growing body of research shows the benefits provided by one's ability to shape the work experience by choosing the type and location of workspace. Results in lower psychological and physiological stress, greater employee satisfaction, and ultimately it hits your top line and it hits your bottom line. And we enjoy what we're doing. What a great world that would be. So how do we do this? This is, by the way, a 2-hour talk, 10 years of experience that I'm distilling into like 2.5 minutes. So we create Agile workspaces. Agile workspaces is a term in the design community by which they mean that there's a space for collaboration, a space where we can focus and do alone work, a space where we can learn, socialize, and respite. None of this is rocket science. You all know this very instinctively. How does that translate for Agile teams? Bless you. We need stand-up rooms. We need meeting rooms that can be scheduled at short notice without worrying about, is it available? You just walk in and it's occupied. We need shared workrooms. We need dedicated workrooms. Quick poll. How many here are from large companies? Large enterprises, government agencies? So you guys have, yeah. And how many from startups or smaller companies? Okay, a bit of a mix, more skewing towards the startups and smaller companies. This is Austin. But I did look on the attendee list, and there are a number of people from larger companies. And the larger companies may have this issue of needing to have a shared workroom across different teams. It might not be the same in a smaller company. You all probably don't need 2 rooms. So how do you go about creating the space? You work with a lot of people. At larger companies, there are a lot of departments involved. You get a designer, you have a lot of people involved who need to help. But the key that I thought was really interesting is how they worked with the team. They had some examples where the managers had created what they thought was a nice room for their employees, and these are well-meaning managers, but it did not meet the needs of the team at all. So involve the team, find an inspiration. This was the inspiration the team came up with. Can anyone tell me what that is?
Sorry, which
Yes.
is that? Yeah, what do you point
Yeah.
to?
If I can point there.
this
No.
doesn't
Oh,
work.
it doesn't work,
Star
okay.
Trek.
Yes, who said that? Very nice.
What did you say?
Let's get him a sticker. Star Trek.
Oh,
Star Trek.
yeah.
It's the British.
Oh, the
Yes,
411.
the next generation, yes. Yes. So this was the inspiration the team chose. And then they did mock-ups and designs, UX, UI. They had things they could interact with and look at. And they solicited requirements from the teams. They had stickies, they had categorization, they had dot voting. And as they were going through the process, they communicated this to everyone on the team. And then they conducted surveys, et cetera. So what did they end up with? This. So as you can see, they have a lot of collaboration spaces via the huddle rooms, the conference rooms, the open space that is reconfigurable. All the walls are whiteboard walls. And you can't see that, but they have a kitchen for socialization and respite. The interesting thing, the other interesting thing to me about this is if I was designing a room, I would not choose that. To me, it's a little dark, but it works really well for the developers. They love this. So it's a space that works really well for their use case. So to change tack a little bit, last year, if you were here last year, you heard us say that we reported to you that teams that are distributed within the same time zone have up to 25% higher productivity.
Wait, higher productivity in teams distributed elsewhere or teams co-located in the same time zone?
Co-located in the same time zone have higher productivity. The minute you're in a different room, it goes down. If you're on a different floor, it goes even further down. If you're in a different building, it continues to go down.
So,
But if you're in the same time zone, it's better than if you weren't in the same time zone. Instinctively, that makes sense, right?
right, it's just,
Yeah.
it's an incomplete sentence, somebody could misread it, so.
Yes. Better productivity than other teams.
Well, then teams in different time zones.
Yeah. So this year we didn't hear anything different. This cites a older study, but at 35 feet, you might as well be in a separate building. Clearly, if you're not in the same space, you might as well be anywhere. It doesn't matter. If you're not in the same room together, you might as well be in Mars, maybe. But whoever has the luxury to work that way, how many of you have worked with distributed teams? Everyone, right? This is the reality of software development. We are an offshore software development company, but even before we work with anyone, the teams are already distributed. And this is for reasons of cost, it's reasons of skills and knowledge. In fact, this picture is from another talk I reference later, where this company that's based in Belgium had people in the US and in Asia. This is the reality of the world we live in. So with that, I just wanted to touch on team agreements a little bit. So here's the situation. Alex Cannon has just joined his firm. He is with his US-based team in Texas, and he has an India-based team in Mumbai. He notices some challenges. The retros are 2 minutes long. The retros, everyone reports everything is fine. There are no impediments. He notices a few things. So he says, let's solve this issue. I see what's wrong. Let me provide feedback. What do you think happened?
Everybody's saying, we wanna get out of here, leave, don't say anything.
Don't say anything. Yes, stop. It didn't go so well. It didn't have the desired effect. He didn't solve the problem. So let's start again. What do? New step 1, build trust. This came from a lot of conversations in the retros, just getting real about, and starting with himself, right? Who is Alex? What is my family? These are some challenges that I'm having personally. Traffic was horrible, it was raining, whatever. You know, getting people to start talking and being really real with people, because these are all human beings. And the next step was giving everyone a voice. Don't just have, especially in a situation where you have two different teams in different parts of the world, don't have one person be a spokesperson of the team, because it inhibits the flow of knowledge, and team members really getting to become a part of the team. So what did they do? What kinds of things did they do, or what values did they use? They really used Scrum values to align safety to speak your mind, everyone speaks, simple things like enunciate, mute yourself when you're not talking, confirm your understanding. There's a very funny video of a conference call that we've all been at. If you Google it, you'll find it, or come find me. I'll pull it up on my phone and I'll show you. These are all very simple things that need to be done. Lessons learned: learn from your journey, leverage Scrum values, evolve your working agreements. Did I say we were going to talk about team agreements? It's actually not about team agreements. It's about how you get to the team agreements, how you get the buy-in from everyone. We all know how to do team agreements. How do we really get everyone to buy in? That's my main takeaway. And if you can do that, this is what you do. You build an awesome team like this. You'll know who this is, right? Yes. Okay, good. Yes, with that, I'm going to pass it to Mike, who's going to talk to us about what else is needed.
Yeah, so hi everyone, thanks for coming. Thanks, Florence.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk about empathy and leadership, topic very well known to David over there. Hopefully I do it justice. So I'm going to start with a story. I'm going to try to go through it quickly. But essentially up in Alaska, Southeast Alaska, the folks that were there at the time happened to be Russians, hunted all the otters out of the area. And because of that, that turned the environment into this sort of wasteland of sea urchins. And the reason why is because otters eat sea urchins, and without otters to kill sea urchins, the sea urchins ate all the kelp, and without the kelp, basically killed off the ecosystem. And so about 1960, they brought otters back from another region. They brought a whole bunch of them and repopulated the area. And what that did is it rebuilt the ecosystem. Ultimately, we ended up with lush underwater forests, and it brought back not only the otters and the kelp, but also helped boom, for instance, the eagle population. Because there was more fish in the area, eagle population grew over that time 20 or 30%. So it was good for the entire environment. So what they call this a keystone species. So a species that, when introduced into the environment, actually more than, it does better than just being there in the environment, right? It actually helps other species do more and be stronger. And so this is a very important concept. So keystone habits. So if anyone has read this book, which I haven't, but it's on my desk, The Power of Habit, the author here, Charles Duhigg, he talks about certain habits create reactions that make your life better in ways that are unexpected, right? And the obvious example is you start exercising, then you start eating better, and then all of a sudden, things just start going a lot better for you. So there's this concept of these keystone species or keystone habits exist. So what does that mean? Well, the speaker that I went and talked to, he brought these two ideas together and brought it into the Agile world and said, hey, maybe the presence of empathy in leaders and in the team in general is what causes that environment to thrive, right? If everyone is being empathetic to each other, then you're going to get a strong ecosystem. And if you have the opposite, you probably kill off the ecosystem. And I think we've all experienced that, I'm guessing, both ends of that, like in places where everyone's working well together, very strong organization, and you're able to achieve milestones that you didn't think were possible. So this was my main takeaway, is having this empathy and building these strong teams, having a lot of trust within the teams is gonna make for the most powerful results, right? You're gonna achieve probably more than you ever expected. just a little bit more on empathy. It comes in 3 different forms according to Jamil's key. I've not read this book and it is not on my desk, but it probably will be soon. Because empathy is actually an important topic to me. It's something that I've really tried to develop over my career as a leader. But it comes in 3 forms. Just quickly, it's sharing, which is the idea of talking to someone, maybe sharing a cry with someone and like making them feel better that way. Thinking about, which is really like getting in the shoes of the person, like wearing their moccasins, as commonly said. And then there's caring about, which is actually doing something, right? So going somewhere and actually helping someone improve their situation. So these are the 3 forms of empathy. Finally, so let's talk about some advantages. These might be obvious, you may have already seen these, but you're gonna have more productive teams. You're gonna be able to deal with diversity and a broader spectrum of people by having empathy for them. And then ultimately what you wanna do is have backbone and heart. So what they're talking about, and actually this is in the Zaki book, is backbone and heart aren't opposite, right? They're actually 2 different dimensions. That's what we're trying to show here. And you want to have both. So you want to have conviction, you have goals, you want to have conviction in those goals, but you also want to listen to your people and adapt to how the people are feeling and how you can best work as a team. So be an empathetic leader. Your leadership values will cast a shadow. It'll bring up the whole team. They'll all start being empathetic as well, and you'll have the best possible organization. And then just one last thing, there's a bunch of habits, you can look at this later, that can help you develop this company.
Are the slides going to be provided or something? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
you'll have access to them.
Thanks,
Mike, can I add a couple of things? So,
Yes, please.
one of the key advantages of empathy from the work that I've done is if you are empathetic, you inspire others to be honest, because you can actually hear the truth from them. If you're not empathetic, they hide the truth from you.
Yes.
So benefit of empathy is you get truth. Benefit of truth is you can actually empathize. They're self-supporting each
So
other.
it's a
And
virtuous
between
cycle.
the 2, you end up building trust. And, trust for me in business terms is quality, right? So if you're trying to create quality, and empathy is something that you as a leader could actually do. You don't need other people to do that. And the way
Yeah,
I would
exactly.
describe that is respectful understanding. So now you can solve this potentially positive building spiral by actually taking the time to respectfully understand where the person talking to you is coming from. And if you're able to do that, they're more likely than not to tell you more truth.
It's interesting you say that, because just to dive a little bit into these habits, the first 3 habits require no interaction with anybody. They're you're looking at yourself and how you behave around other people. So it's exactly your point, right? You can do a lot of this without ever having to interact with another person.
In other words, you're empowered.
Yes,
Right? This is not something dependent on others for you to do.
correct.
Just out of curiosity, number 4, is that asking them, asking yourself?
Yeah, so if someone has a really negative reaction, good question. If someone has a really negative reaction or a really strange reaction, you can say, where's that coming from? Because there's probably some need that's not being met or some issue that they're having that you don't understand that's creating this reaction. And so by digging in and figuring out what's really causing them to have this reaction helps you get to the truth that you were talking about. Any other questions?
Yep, the next one, help people empty their cup.
So that's, that one's a little bit difficult to describe, but the idea is if you're the one always talking, then you have a full cup, right? You're not taking in, you're not able to take in any information because you're the one too busy giving out the information. So your cup becomes full. It's a kind of a Chinese proverb thing. Have you heard of it before?
I would describe it as there's 2 states. Either you're expressing or you're listening. If you're only expressing, you've missed the listening.
Yeah, and that's the full cup. And so
Yeah.
you wanna help someone empty their cup. So
You should be listening more than you're talking.
yeah, basically that's the idea.
Where does body language get it? Or don't, obviously that person didn't discuss it or what?
They did not talk about it, but I mean, it's part of
That's part.
communication is your body language, your tone, like all of this matters, right? If you have a negative tone and you're saying a positive thing, it's gonna sound really negative. I mean, we all know that. But, so, I mean, you have to think about all the factors.
But I think if you're naturally empathetic, just your body language is gonna follow with what you're saying.
But there are some very clever little body languages that
Of course, yeah, I mean, and that's why face-to-face interactions are always better, because you can pick up on those, because you may be something, like say, saying something very positive or very negative, but you could be smiling, or, you know, like, you could have the opposite actual body language, and so maybe you're being sarcastic, right, but you can't tell that on a text or an email or a conference call. So,
If
you know,
don't
always try to get
understand,
face.
ask.
Yeah, ask, yeah.
Ask. So that, you know, that's part of empathy, is actually a dialogue. And then I would offer one warning on body language, that it is cultural. So it's also important to understand the cultural mix, especially if we have international teams.
Yeah,
Right?
good point.
And it also is, you know, the experience of the person, like, there's the joke, how can you tell an introverted engineer from an extroverted engineer? An extroverted engineer is looking at your shoes. It can depend on the style of the team you're working with, right? So, there are real cultural characteristics to body language. Just, and again, if you're confused, ask.
Yeah, yeah, definitely,
Yeah.
that's good advice. Any other questions? Seems to be an interesting topic.
I wonder how empathy is played with conversing with people who tend to stonewall.
Yeah, so stonewalling is a behavior that's caused by lack of trust, right? So you have to break through that. And you mentioned that in yours, is like you need to talk, open a dialogue, go to coffee. Like I remember in one of my jobs, we were in Seattle, lots of coffee shops. There was 4 within 2 blocks of my office. And we'd just go on walks. And that was a way to break down those barriers and figure out why they're, like I said, their needs are probably not being met in some way. Like maybe there's something that's going on under the covers that you need to just figure out better. But it's not an easy answer, right? People might stonewall for many different reasons. So you just gotta figure out what that is to
And you're
ask.
not gonna solve that in one go, right? It's gonna take a long time.
Do you, if the possible reason might be envy, what could you do about that?
If it's envy, well, again, you have to build trust. I'm not an expert psychologist, so I can't really answer that at a deep level, but essentially, you know, building trust. Somehow you have to figure out how to build trust so that you don't have that envy anymore, right? Like get rid of whatever needs aren't being met that causes that. Figure out how to sort those out.
If they would love to talk about it.
Communication, yeah, you're
Yeah,
gonna have to open up.
sometimes
like-
it's hard. Some people are
Yeah,
hard.
open up
This is-
communication.
This is why a lot of what we're talking about here has to do with these topics. How do you make good software? With good people, and we're
Yeah.
all good people.
Yeah, and you have
But
to
we
have
have
a
to bring it
strong
out of
team.
ourselves and each other.
Yeah, and ultimately, all the people working together makes for a stronger team. So I'm gonna pass it to Vinayak.
Hey, thanks.
We have some more
Thanks,
topics to
Mike.
cover. You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, so this
I'll
time,
take this chair.
before I go to the UX design, you know, I have some interesting things to share, that we had a keynote address, and, you know, Agile, I always felt is about experimentation, right? So we always conducted experiments with teams and with organizations, but we heard a keynote address where the experiments were done by the individual with himself. Now, one of the experiments that he carried out was, how can you bore yourself? What is, you know, you really want to bore yourself down, so what will you do? So the experiment, I'll just give you 2 funny examples that he shared. So one of the experiments that he carried out to bore himself was to read the iTunes usage terms, you know, word by word. So that's one of the experiments. And the other one was even funnier. He called American Airlines and said that he has lost luggage, and then they put him on hold, and he heard the music. Yeah, there's some other, I mean, we'll go through that. That's my last takeaway. So I covered it now so that you wait till the last one. Right? So I'm going to talk about takeaways about user experience, and I have been covering that in the last year as well as the year before last. How much of software that we build after spending millions of dollars is really used? So 37% of apps that are downloaded are never opened. People download the apps and then they're never used, right? And of the remaining 63%, 60% of the features are never used, right? So there's a whole lot of money that we are spending and users are not using that. So that's the reason why I am so passionately talking about user experience every year. So the two topics I'm going to cover about user experience. One is having user experience design within this sprint. So earlier we talked about doing user experience in a UX or a design sprint first, and then continuing that, with, it's like a handoff, like a waterfall model, and then you continue with that design. So that's what someone talked about last year. I had covered it last year. So instead of that, why don't we do it as a cross-functional team, right? That's the idea. So have a UX designer sit along with your developer, your QA, your DevOps person. Have a UX designer in the team, maybe part-time. How's the idea? Okay, so you get real-time feedback and improve upon not only whether you're satisfying the acceptance criteria laid down by your product owner, but actually go to the end user and see by the user experience designer interviewing the end user whether the end user is getting the desired outcome or not, which is much more valuable, so that we end up building products that are actually used, right? So that's the idea behind having a user experience designer within the team. Do you think it's a brilliant idea? Yeah? Have you seen a user experience designer? Any of you? Yeah? Ponytails, Mac, right? Shorts. Right?
Yeah, the trouble
It's
is
a
getting
tough
them
one.
in the morning, in the morning.
It's a tough one, right? So here's what, here was the Scrum team says about user experience designers. They take too long. They're creative people. They say you can't bind creativity by schedules. You can't say that you do it and you come up with something in a week. Not possible. They create unrealistic requirements. They say that, okay, this is something which I want to, this is my dream. Come, go build it. Now, how is it possible, right? The design polish is nice to have, but not a must have. I mean, it's functionally I can build something, but then the kind of polish, the amount of time and energy and efforts they spend is too much. I don't want to labor through the whole list. Look at what the team looks like, jeans, t-shirt, and then they probably use Ubuntu Mac, Ubuntu laptop, probably a Dell, and they, sorry. And then what they say, the UX designers say they demand final and signed off design, right? You tell us what you want. How can I tell him what I want when I don't know what I want, right? I'm still working on it. It's the ideas are still evolving. My creative juice is still flowing. My work isn't there, product backlog. Now, you have product backlog in which you show cards. But now, if you ask a user experience designer what did he do today, he is unable to stand up in the Scrum and say that this is what I did today and this is what I'm going. He's just saying that, okay, I'm trying to, dream of things. I'm letting my mind wander or something like that. I mean, for which you got to pay him whatever top dollars, right? So, which is crazy, but that's what UX designers want. I have nothing to add or say to their daily Scrum. So if you see like a daily Scrum, and I have a UX designer in the Scrum meeting. He's generally standing not in the circle but outside, and it's obviously sticking out like a sore thumb because he's really not a part of it. So that's the problem, right? So what is the solution? So how many of you were in those days still working in companies where they used to have QA and development in separate silos, right? Now, today they work together, don't they? Right? These two were totally different animals, wired differently. One was breaking and the other one was making, right? And how did you get them to work together? Yeah, you gave them time, you put them in a room and say, you figure out. That's what you need to do here. You have to give them time. You have to work together. So that's the solution for this. For having a good cross-functional team. So this is a summary of solution. Bring us and them instead of the us and them. It should be we, right? Treat all workforce as first class and important work. So on and so forth. There are multiple. I don't want to go through the whole list. The slides will be on. So this is the summary or the takeaway for this. I want to cover one more thing in the user experience design. That is a concept of business agility. So this time in the conference, they talked about business agility. This is a new stage that got started. So we build products or we build businesses. What are we here for? We are building products. What are the products for? Because we want to build businesses, right? So focusing our attention more on business, just the way you have a product owner, you have a business owner who this role sits on top of the product owner role and helps you define what is really needed by business, right? So we'll talk a little bit more about the role. So the business agility as a concept is more about adapting quickly to market changes internally and externally, right? Responding rapidly to flexibly to customer demands. So bringing agility in how you respond to the market conditions, right? Not just to the requirements, change in requirements, but how your organization respond to the change in market conditions. How you adapt and lead change in productive and cost-effective way without compromising quality, adapting, and continuously be at competitive advantage. So these are some of the things that characterize business agility as compared to how do we respond to this change?
Water boiling?
Yeah, there's water boiling. And okay, all right. So I think someone needs to take care of that because, yeah, I can ask this gentleman, right? So, what does a business owner do and what he doesn't do? That is summarized in this slide. So, what it is, it's a role, right? It's not like business owner doesn't actually own equity in the business. It's a role. What it is not, it's not a position. It's not a designation that entitles the business owner to own the business. No. It's just like product owner, that is a role that is played. It's like, more like a program manager. The next slide will make it a little more clear, right? So he is more who is a visionary, who is a business coach, who's a facilitator, and less like somebody who's a leader or a manager, like who's managing the project. It's more like facilitation, less like command and control. What he does business strategy, planning, evolution, review. What he doesn't do is specific product strategy, right? He gives a overall big picture to the product owners, product managers, but he doesn't decide the specific product strategy, right? He imposes assumptions, that these are the assumptions. He doesn't impose assumptions, and he's absent from activities. So let me show you the model. This is known as the business accelerator model. On this side, you have the levels. So here's the business owner level. This is the product level, right? This is the process level and this is the people level. And then you have organizations which evolve. These are the 3 stages of evolution, right? Now, you have at the lowest level digital culture, agile culture, all that cultural things for the individuals or people. At the next level, you have the processes such as Kanban, Scrum, and all that. And the next level, you have, at the initial stage, you have a product owner with team members, then you might have a couple of product owners with couple of teams. Or finally, you may have a product manager with product owners reporting to him. And at the top level, you have the sponsor and the business owner. So you have product managers and product owners who report to the business owner. And the business owner is giving the overall direction of the business strategy, and he leaves it to the product owners and product managers to decide the specific product strategy. So that's the role of the product owner. So, which I found interesting, because finally we are not building just products, we are building businesses. So that's the takeaway. With that, I'll let Florence take the next one.
Thanks, Vinayak. So, before one of us falls and breaks our neck in front of all of you, one is out of the way.
Most likely will be me.
You don't know how clumsy I am. But, okay, so we know a lot about UX and diverse teams, right? Diversity of skill set that we bring in, and the role of business owner. So, to me, this is still the core takeaway for me. We still have to plan before every battle. So how do we do that? This was a very interesting talk. Again, all of you know all of this. You've all been in multiple work sessions. This was a wonderful work session by Angie Doyle and Talia Lancaster. They're out of South Africa, and they gave a very practical workshop on how to get teams to come together. So I love this from their abstract, from the abstract of their talk. They say getting new teams to work together is hard, really hard. And is it because we forget that it's actually people that do the work? You know, when you try to impose something on them, it's hard for them to understand and adopt what we've imposed on them and adapt to wherever they are. So they say, we believe the key to high performance teams is creating an intentional culture that respects and embraces diversity. If you don't like the term diversity, we can say everyone. That respects and embraces everyone. And high performance teams is what we all want to be a part of, correct? Apart from the fact that high performance teams create value, but that's really where we all want to spend our time. So, very practical, a team canvas. I'm sure you all have seen this or some variant of this. What I liked about what they said and did was, the slides are going to go out, all the links will go out, and we can provide more links if you want for references. But the key to me on this was working through each of this with the team, with everyone on the team. You know, it's not just the leadership working through this and then telling the organization, here is how we're going to work. Working through each of these, I've numbered them. We'll go through a few of them. So for purpose, for instance, you know, if some of you are founders here, you know, you've spent a lot of time trying to think about what your problem statement is, what your solution is, and how it's different from everything else. Have all of your team work on this, so they really get good buy-in. And they might have an insight that you didn't, possibly. So the problem statement, our unique skills, how we make the world a better place. Pen and paper, write it down, everyone write it down, and then talk about it. And then come to that common team understanding of it. At larger organizations, it's about what you're doing for your specific team. At a startup, it's the whole shebang. It's your company. This was another one. This we actually did at the table that I was at. To identify your common goals, they had this really wonderful board game where you work through SMART goals, and you ask each other questions that you pull from these decks of cards. And as you pull those questions, each of you answers the question. And you come up with sort of a consensus on the problem that you're trying to solve. In this case, the problem we were trying to work through is how to increase the social media reach, a very vague goal of this new product. And they throw wildcards in there, which is interesting because we had one come up in our round, and as we were going through, I've done startups myself, bootstrap startups, and we work with a lot of companies that are, some that are on the smaller scale, mostly that are a little bit bigger, but on the smaller scale, and even the bigger ones, we're all resource constrained, as are some of the larger projects I know, but we're all resource constrained. And so my first instinct was, look, I have 20+ years of business experience. I've worked with startups. I've worked with small companies. We need to do this ourselves. Let's do this ourselves. His wild card said something different. His wild card said, think like a rock star. We didn't know this, so he threw out there, what if, let's go out and hire the best firm that is out there. We're like, no, you're crazy. But you're being collaborative. You're in a workshop. You're in Washington, D.C. So we played nice and we listened to him. And then at the end of it, he revealed that was what his role was. And it was really interesting because we did have a good conversation about that. And it got us thinking, and it got me thinking. I'm like, wait, maybe I was too afraid in some of my startups. Maybe we should think bigger. But always be smart about that. The next one was identifying your personal goals. You all know SMART goals. SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. Smarter, evaluate, and rethink. Which works really well for our Agile community, right? You always want to go back and rethink your goals. Again, this is an exercise you work through with the rest of your team. Maybe you share it with them, maybe you share some of it with them, but it really helps in getting to know each other and building that trust and building that empathy. How do we communicate and keep everyone up to date? We all know variations of this, and we all try variations of this. But just going through in some excruciating detail with, again, the entire team. You can use the Scrum Kickoff Planner. It's kind of cut off, but Adam Weishut has a really good template that you can use. And going through that in some detail is useful. And it's not one person writing this down and deciding what's going to be done. It's the team deciding what's going to be done. So we won't go over every aspect, but what is the key? Work through it with the team. Make it fun and get real alignment. Real alignment comes through lots of conversations when the guards come down. Guards come down when real trust is formed. And real trust is formed when people get to know each other. And that's where magic happens. It's hard. We all have to do it. If we do it well, it'll be fun, and we'll get some great results. With that, again, what does this have to do with Agile? People? I got asked this question once, so it's all about people. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
All right.
To talk about metrics.
Yes.
Measuring some of this.
Thank you, Florence.
All this fluffy.
Yeah, so I'm diverting from topics like empathy and team building, and we're going to talk about metrics. And so I like this quote from John. He's basically like, in his presentation, he's like, there's this book definition of what metrics are for, and it's very boring and expansive and long. And he's like, why don't we just make it simple? Like, let's build good stuff and measure how we build that good stuff so we can get better at building good stuff. And I thought that was really good, right? Let's keep it simple, and that's probably what we should do with the metrics as well. So metrics can be evil, and that's because of this concept of perverse incentives, right? So good intentions driving bad behavior. So let's put a measurement on this so that we can, see if we're doing a good job, but then it ends up being, a negative consequence for the team. And so he has this concept of, people talk about gaming the system, but it's really putting the measurement, putting the target on the system that's actually the game, right? So the managers create the game. It's not that the employees are gaming the system. I thought this was a very good observation. So if you walk away from here, good intentions driving bad behaviors, managers gaming the system, it's not the employee's fault, right? So don't put targets on it. That's really the idea. Use metrics to get better, but don't use metrics to measure people, right? That's very important. Quickly about velocity, so Doc, everyone's been asked for more velocities, right? I mean, who hasn't? He's saying don't use it as a metric, right? This is a very common mistake. People are like, well, we got this nice little number here. Let's just try to make that number bigger every time. But really, it's not intended for that at all. So don't do that. But you can use it for planning. It's actually intended for that, and it's very good for that. So here's a bunch of metrics. The good ones and the evil ones and the less evil ones that I'm going to describe it, because probably they're all ultimately evil in some way. But the point here of this is not any of these specifics, but these metrics here, if you look at them carefully, are actually measuring how the system is dysfunctional, not how people are dysfunctional, right? So that's the key, right? Look for measurements that are gonna help you remove problems in the system. That's ultimately what we're talking about. And like I said, these slides are available if you wanna look through these, but I'll go quickly. So finally, just to wrap it up, I've already kind of mentioned this, but another is the measure the work, not the people. I think that's a very key takeaway. Measure the work, not the people. Make the system better. Don't try to figure out who's not doing a good job. Most people want to do a good job, so just assume that that's what they're going to do. Build trust and be transparent. I mean, obviously that's important. I mean, that's how that's going to work. But the being transparent part is really about explain why you're doing the metrics, right? Let's talk through it. Let's make it a team exercise. Let's not have it be a top-down decision. And then finally, if you can tie your measurements to the company mission, like how does this thing, making this thing better, actually help the company and the world, right? Some missions of some companies are actually changing the world. So if you can tie all that together, it's going to be even better for you. Yes.
Do you have a way to help people identify how they're measuring other people so they don't do it?
Do I have a? I mean, it's really.
They might be doing it. I mean, they might be continuously doing it because maybe that's how they're.
Yeah, they're trained to do it, or you're supposed to make your SMART goals, and so it's like, hey, let's have your velocities go up by 1 step next week.
If you
But
don't know how to identify that, then if your people don't know how to identify it, then they won't be able to self.
yeah, so here's ideas on here that are kind of obviously in this direction is team satisfaction, right? I mean, measure that. Like, how happy is the team? That's probably a pretty good indication if you're doing the right thing or not. Defect backlog, not like number of defects, but just like how many, what's their visibility into the defects. Throughput variance is actually really important right now in the Agile community. People talked about this, where it's how consistently do we actually achieve throughput, and why aren't we consistently doing it if we're not? So it's not really about what your throughput is, it's about how reliably are you producing this throughput. And then that's less about the people, right? That's more about the system. Does that help?
Well, I'm guessing the worst case where you catch someone or employee or coworker measuring other people. Do you step in and go, oh wait a minute, I see that you're measuring someone else and you can't have that.
Yeah, systematically, you'd have to do that as a leader or as someone that has an influence in that organization, looking for instances where people do this and just weeding it out of the system. Yeah.
I think the empathy and leadership is a great place to start, like how the leaders within an organization kind of radiate the culture that needs to happen.
Yes.
Is one, and then I think the other is any metrics that happen then, if you can really get the whole team to decide what those metrics will be, because the team is made up of individuals, and it might be made up of their leaders as well, who may need to achieve goals or have different objectives. Have everyone have that conversation, and then people understand and know, and then there's trust, and then whatever gets decided will ultimately be better. More heads are always better than one. But not easy.
So I think just having a culture where people aren't being punished. They call it, actually I didn't mention this, but they call it punitive measures, right? So don't make these measurements punitive, right? Don't tie it to your performance rating, because that's when they start being destructive.
Mike, you have a question?
Oh,
over here?
sorry. Yes.
You had tied metrics to company mission. Was that the customer mission, or was that your own?
No, your own company's mission.
Software development.
Your own company's mission in this case, assuming it's a product company, yeah.
So for us at Synerzip, we should have our own mission. I mean, we have our own mission, and we should measure to it as well. And part of our mission is making our customers and clients happy. And it's the same for every company. Every company is. These are the goals I'm trying to achieve, and part of the goals that I'm trying to achieve are make my customers and my employees, all my stakeholders happy. And when you can do that, that's a beautiful virtuous cycle. Would you agree?
Yeah, so the point is, if someone feels their work is connected to the bigger picture, they're gonna be much more productive. They're gonna be more happy to go to work the next day. So that's kind of the point.
I'm just wondering, because in the team talk and all that, no one's talked about marketing. And it seems maybe that's where a lot of that tug of war arises, because the marketing person gets involved in the success of his customer, and maybe even gets more business when they're successful, and therefore their commission. You're not seeing any of that, so you get into these wars between marketing.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
think there's a lot of internal wars too.
Yeah, that
Inside the
happens.
companies. It's not just in marketing, it's internally as well.
Oh, yeah, the executives do
but,
that.
but
They're
I think part of the point is if they're aligned to the same common goals of the company, the same mission, then you'll have less of that, right? Because everyone's incentivized to work together for the greater good. That's ultimately what you're trying to achieve. Now, all of us in this room, some of us might be closer to the top of the tree than the others, but like, it's difficult to make that happen from the bottom up. I mean, that's really kind of a corporate culture kind of thing.
But you gave the tie at the beginning, and maybe that has to be some sort of function, and that is keep the customer happy. So what makes them happy, and it could be by level. Executives for the customer, turning a profit, making more money for the stockholder. Happiness for a person in the pit, and handling, rescheduling doctor's appointments and things like that. It's her happiness.
Yeah, ultimately, you're trying to make everyone feel like they matter, right? And, you know, if you can do that, your customers are gonna be happy. Like, if you have a happy organization, it's actually proven that your customers are gonna be happier, and then that's gonna lead to better bottom line. Yes?
Do you have a slide that describes, like, a why a particular metric is in it, the evil column versus the less evil column?
I
We should do a
well,
webinar on this.
Yeah, we can, actually, it might be good for us to reach out to the guy who did this, John Tanner. He,
Yeah,
and
bring in-
he this was an hour and 15-minute presentation. He had a lot of information, right? I just tried to distill it down to, but he does actually show examples of these and how to structure them, and also talks about why some of them are evil. But mostly because the evil ones are almost always because you're measuring somebody, right, or a team. And you're like stage gate performance, I don't know if anyone's has been in that before, but it's basically, where are we at on the project? We're 47% complete, but we're supposed to be 62% complete, and now you're busted. We gotta work weekends to catch up. I mean, that's not helpful, right, ultimately. What's better than that is, you know, how far away are we from the finish line? And what is it costing us not to be there yet? Those are things that are more interesting to measure. Okay, I think I'm gonna pass the baton.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, we literally have one.
So, you know,
One more, sorry.
all right. So, I'm going to talk about DevOps. So, DevOps is a piece which enables you to build user experience by continually delivering small product increments and testing them in the hands of the end user. So I'm very passionate about DevOps. So building a CI/CD pipeline was a topic, and for building microservices. So these small product increments, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the new change that is happening, that you have small product increments which are, vertical slices called microservices, which are good at doing one thing. And, delivering these microservices in a continual way, in just the way we talked about doing CI and CD for monoliths, you can actually build. So there are certain patterns that Richard Mills talked about, which are very interesting patterns to follow the takeaways. And so this is a set of tools that you can look up the slide that are typically used in a continuous delivery pipeline for microservices. But these are some of the patterns. So the pipeline code, I try to make better user experience by using this pointer, right, instead of. So pipeline code follows branching strategy. like, you know, you have number of branching and merging happening in your code. Like you have hot fixes, release branches, feature branches. So let your pipeline code also follow the same branching strategy. You can't have the pipeline code in the trunk and, you know, then trying to make it work with specific branches. Pre-merge with master. So before merging, test it. So because pipeline needs to be tested. So how do you test the pipeline? By pre-merging it and running it in, deploying it in an ephemeral environment, a virtual environment, maybe on the cloud, specifically meant for this purpose. Before merging, test whether the pipeline works, and then only you merge it. Each service has its own pipeline, right? So if there are multiple microservices, each microservice will have its own pipeline. It will have the same version number as the microservice has. And full stack developers. So you have vertical slices in which you have developers working on both the user interface as well as the API. So backend and front-end developers thinking of, we will be talking a little bit about what we call as a bounded context, thinking of the entire microservice which does one good thing, which is good at doing one thing. One individual thinking about it and delivering it from back to front end himself works out much better. So having full stack developers is another good pattern. So these were the main takeaways, and this picture again shows the way the pipeline works and how it is promoted from test to dev to test and from test to production. So I will not go through this diagram, there's a lot of detail in this, but you can refer to this and the talk by Richard Mills. You can look up Richard Mills online.
Mills,
Mills, M-I-L-L-S, Mills.
is CI, continuous?
Continuous integration, as you do in case of Jenkins kind of thing, right? Yeah. So with that, let's come to the next talk again on DevOps, which was about telemetry. How do you monitor these microservices? Because each application, you could step through the application using some kind of debugging tool when you had end-to-end one monolith, right? But then now you have microservices handing off control from one to the next to the next to the next, and you don't know. They may be in different locations, running on different servers on the cloud, in different availability zones in different regions. So how do you affect traceability? So for which traceability, observability, and monitoring has become very important, and it has its own special tools. So before we go there, I have a question. Which one of this is an evil metric? You talked about evil metrics, right? Evil metrics, which one of this is, do you think, so this was an experiment carried out, it's a Garden Grove experiment in which they actually wanted to see which metric or which way will finally work well for actually effectively slow down the traffic. So what do you think?
Love to be
Give control.
Those who
Well,
think
did they
the
see
control,
the police officer?
the con-
That's a big key of whether that works or not.
this one?
Yeah, no, I'm saying, can you see the police officer? It kind of looks like he's a little bit hiding there, so
You're
that
right.
probably doesn't work.
Yeah. So even otherwise, I mean, let's forget that for the time being. This is a good observation. You caught it well, but let's say that you have a gun and you know it, right? And then that's a punitive kind of metric. Whereas here's something where you get the control yourself. So the experiment finally reached a conclusion that you're having the same speed gun, but you're allowing the end user to make that decision that, okay, let me slow down and let me, so which works better in the end for, actually the number of vehicles which followed this was better for a number of reasons. So telemetry is something about measuring and showing you logs, traces, and getting you to understand the way your application is behaving and the way your bits and bytes are moving through the network. So,
Vinayak, you have a question?
yeah.
Well, actually, of the two examples, the first one, only one person knows the speed limit using that machine, whereas the second one, it's the driver and everyone else driving behind that person, which is peer pressure.
Yeah.
That's
So
a good,
it's,
good point. I don't know whether you're audible at the end, but what she's saying, she is okay, right?
So
There was a question in the back.
both of them are measuring people, but
Yeah.
the second one gives more visibility to
Yeah, yeah.
the person who is doing
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
plus
so
everyone.
he has to appear responsible in front of the community of other drivers, yeah.
But I think that if his definition of evil versus less evil is measuring people, it is still doing that, so I don't know how to answer this question.
Yeah,
So I don't know if you noticed that Google Maps slowed down and got a little less effective for the last 2-3 months. But they worldwide, globally rolled out your speed and the speed limit of where you're driving. And it's now on your Google Map display when you're doing Google.
wow.
So in an effort to make driving safer.
So were there results from this, were there results from this experiment as to whether police or these public meters reduced?
Yeah, the public meters work better.
Okay.
And overall reducing
Overall.
speed.
Yeah.
speed,
How did they measure the speed reduction?
They
How
did
did
the
they
spe-
know, I guess, that people were slowing
Yeah,
down?
yeah, probably the experiment also had I mean, I don't know the details. I'll have to ask,
They probably had
those who
another
carried out,
monitor
so,
somewhere to
yeah,
monitor that.
so.
repeat offenders.
So you can look up Garden Grove experiment on Google and probably you'll find how it was conducted and the details about it. Right?
Yeah.
So, moving on, what does a telemetry ecosystem look like? So you have, on each of the microservices, you have a sidecar that is kind of a sensor which is collecting all the data, which could be using Fluentd or Envoy or some, and then that sensor passes whatever the data, it could be the CPU load or whatever the matrix that it is gathering, it passes on, and then there is an aggregator which creates the summary of it. And then you have presentation layer where you use tools like Grafana or Kibana, where you are actually able to see the dashboard and draw your own conclusions and take actions using a scheduler. So it could be either Elastic or Prometheus or InfluxDB kind of thing. So the data gets stored in these things. So one more takeaway from this session was, how much data do you think will come from, because these are like number of pods, as you call in Kubernetes, and each pod has a sidecar, and from there, there are hundreds of thousands of these pods from where data is flowing. So how do you store this data and how do you process this data? What's the mechanism of getting these metrics? So they introduced us to a tool called NiFi, which is short form for Niagara Falls. So it's like taking Niagara kind of data in and then processing that. So finally it is stored in MongoDB. So you can look up NiFi. So that is how you handle large data of logs, traces, and events. So with this, I think we are done, halfway.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
You wanna sit over there? Thanks, Vinayak. So, let's see, okay. So you asked about marketing and sales. I think one thing I'll share with you, that's a clash that is there in every company, or a healthy sparring that is there in every company between sales and marketing and kind of the product and product development. But anyway, I wanted to share this insight about UX again, how it can really help increase revenue for, in this case, Tammy Rice gave a talk. She was a product manager at JustWorks. JustWorks is a B2B SaaS company. that has a payroll, benefits, HR software. She was charged with increasing their self-service line of business from $750,000 in ARR to $5 million in ARR, annual recurring revenue. Long story short, she did it. We're gonna go into a little bit of what she did. All, again, very simple stuff. What I want you to take from this is self-service is very important for B2B SaaS companies, also B2C, but B2B SaaS companies. I won't specifically talk about it, but just look at the results. And then quantify desired outcomes. You need those metrics, whether you're gathering from telemetry systems or whatever you're doing. You need to quantify them. You need to be outcome driven, whether it comes from the mission of the company or the value you're delivering to the customer. So one of the first things that she did when she came in was she started measuring the data and outcomes. And a pre-step to that was building trust, and which is always the first place to start before you come into a situation, a team, an organization, start measuring data. But she talked a little bit about the goals that they had when she came in. This was the funnel for the self-service line of business. They wanted to go from a single page to a multi-step, smaller pages. Great goal, makes sense. From lots of fields to fewer fields, have less questions to be answered by someone who's on a page, etc. Not bad, but not very specific. So she transformed that to a little bit of more actual outcomes, where you go from where you start talking about increasing, let's say, the number of prospects that request a quote within 1 day of completing registration. And how do you do that? You may do, this is what you want to achieve, and there are different things in here that you might want to do. But it's outcome driven, it helps align the organization. I just give a little blurb on OKR's objectives and key results. Really fantastic stuff. Go out and read that. SMART, OKR. Use something to be able to measure how you're doing it, but don't be evil. Decide on what you're going to use and be outcome driven.
What's Pardot on the data to HubSpot? The last.
Pardot is a tool.
It's a marketing
Marketing
product.
Thanks.
Okay.
Marketing tool.
Where is that?
It's on the fourth. It
It's
says data to HubSpot.
Data
The
Oh,
last current.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Pardot, yes. It's a Salesforce product. So understand and map your funnel. Map out all your steps. She used InVision. You can use PowerPoint, Visio, anything. Stickies. Understand what your customers go through on their journey. Find the leaks, because a customer comes to your website, not everyone signs up. Where are you losing them? For an enterprise product, it could be maybe someone doesn't go through all the steps of the process fast enough. Plug the leaks before you turn on the tap. How do you do that? Mind the fundamentals. UX fundamentals like above the fold still hold. Use the same words, good copy. Use pretty pictures. I'll come back to that in a bit. Provide social proof. Give someone a reason to use your website. Guide the prospect through steps. I'm sure most of you already know all of this, and if you don't, these are known good things to do in the in the technology, website, startup world, and in the world of building good products. Let's just do them. Very often we get caught up in just trying to do something really fast that we who know better forget some of these simple things. Just a little bit about the above the fold thing. You all know what that is, right? This is the concept that have the most important thing on the front page of your website, on the top of your website. There is an increasing body of thought that thinks that it doesn't hold anymore. We've had iPhones and computers for a long enough time. We know how to deal with web pages. We're familiar with infinite scrolling. It still holds true. This study by NN group shows that in 2018, 57% of viewing time was still spent above the fold. In 2010, it was about 80%, but now it's 57%, so it's higher,
Here, I'll put-
but not as, but it's still significant. You can't ignore this, not yet. Mind the copy. Use easy words. Keep it at a 6th to 9th grade level. Even if you're very erudite, it helps. Explain the value along the way. Social proof. Like what they did was, they were actually working with big name companies like Aetna, MetLife, etc. Great brands. Show them, tell them. If no one's heard of you, it'll make it more reassuring. Use client testimonials. This is from our website. Use pretty pictures. Pretty pictures is not just a vanity attribute. It's table stakes. We're all used to, or getting used to good UI now. Don't give your customers this. Give them something easy to work with. Pretty equals easy in a way. But test the meaning with your customers. This might make sense to you and the rest of your developers and your UX and your designers, but maybe it doesn't mean the same thing to your customers. Test it. I have some more examples down the road. This is a client of ours and a Capital Factory portfolio company. They are a wonderful team based in Dallas, and they have a phone service for seniors. It blocks out spam and bad calls. They were trying to improve their organic Google numbers, and they tweaked their website in a very simple way. We all, and actually, you know what, I asked a developer, I showed this to a developer and I tested it, and he didn't fully see the difference between the two, which was an interesting perspective for me to understand, and I was glad I heard that perspective. Because when I see this, I say, oh my gosh, obviously this is better, there's more white space, it looks organized.
It's
I like
cleaner.
Bigger font.
bigger font.
Yeah.
But a developer doesn't always see that. So know that as well. Because sometimes you have to, this is why you need those that's why you need UX in the sprint. You need that cross-functional, what is it? Cross-functional team and all that diversity of thought. Because someone will have a different perspective, and for them to understand what you're thinking, for you to understand that, if I say build me a pretty page, they might come up with something that looks pretty to them, but is not what I'm trying to do. Anyway, so they did this, and they saw some really good results. He was able to share this with me, where they had an improvement of 94% in average time on page, and a drop of 17% in bounce rate from that page. And this translated into real revenue dollars for them, a hockey stick. So it works.
And they said it was like a 2-hour change, right?
It was a 2-hour change, simple. Simple, it's out there, it's good practice, people know, you can, it's above the fold in a Google search. You can do this, so do it. Main takeaways, start with measuring what is important. And fundamental UX rules matter. So what does this have to do with Agile? Our highest priority, do you all know what this is? This is from the Agile Manifesto, and this is the first principle that supports the Agile Manifesto. Our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of value. And do it with some diversity on the team.
Okay, my turn again. So, diversity is something that is very interesting to me, because I come from one of the higher privilege classes, as everyone knows, right? I'm white, I'm male,
Tall.
also tall, and all of these things benefit me tremendously. And so, I've thought about, like, at some point not too long ago, someone mentioned, you got where you were because, you have all this privilege. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I just worked hard. Isn't that how I got here? So anyway, that's why I'm interested in this, because it is more than that, and we need, you know, it's important for me and everyone to understand that. But this isn't really about diversity, this particular talk. It is, but it's actually more about the disclosure piece, right? And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So let's just imagine that you have really bad knees or really sore legs, and you really can't do stairs. It's very uncomfortable for you, and you just can't do it. And you are talking to somebody, and you're walking along, and you approach the situation, and you want to go to the right. But imagine if the right wasn't there. There's only stairs. Now you have to stop and talk to the person and say, hey, I'm uncomfortable doing the stairs. Can we go look for an elevator, right? That's a really uncomfortable conversation. This may be something you don't want to have to say to anybody. Like, you don't necessarily want to give up that you have this problem, right? So having this situation allows you to naturally just move over to the right, go up the walkway, nobody's gonna care, and things move on. You've not had to disclose anything. So that's the context. So then there's all these different elements of diversity, right? There's the obvious ones, and then there's hidden ones, right? There's things going on inside people's heads that they just don't want to share, they're uncomfortable sharing, but they're real issues that affect them. And so be aware of this, right? Be aware that we all have some elements of these, right? I have my hearing's failing as I get older, and like I get into a situation where I'm in a conversation in a noisy room, I have to keep asking people to repeat themselves, or I have to ask to walk out of the room, and that's very uncomfortable for me, right? Because it's a new thing for me, and it's just really kind of a problem. So, you know, everyone has some element of this hidden thing. So, because this was an Agile conference, this person is she's great. She worked for Apple for a really long time, and now she's at Pivotal. And so she tried to tie it to, like, you know, why is this? So this inclusion is like DevOps. So the point there, I think, I'm not 100% sure, is that it's kind of everywhere, right? You need it in a whole bunch of different places, but it's not obvious, right? So, you know, think about that. And the one key point off this slide that I want to really, I think, hits home is if you've met one person with some kind of situation like deafness, it doesn't mean they're all the same, right? Like, just not every deaf person has the exact same experience, right? So you have to, just because you've interacted with a deaf person, you've had a really positive experience, doesn't mean that's going to work out necessarily the next time, right? So be very wary of that, right? Like, that's the real thing. So if you've met one, you've only met one. I think, you know, don't out people. That's just kind of a nice thing. Make sure there's psychological safety. I mean, that's a big overall thing in diversity now. So a few techniques. I won't go over these in too much detail. I mean, yes, and is great. It's an improv technique, but it's an inclusive thing, right? It's like, I understand your point, and let's keep talking about this, or go in a different direction, or whatever. It keeps the conversation open, and also acknowledges back that you understand, and you're, you know, understanding their position. But this is the thing that really was interesting to me, is this concept of user manuals. And this is actually a user guide for the human being, right? So everyone on your team answers a common set of questions, and you publish it in a place that everyone can see. And these questions can be like, what are your likes? What are your interests? What are your challenges, right? Like, I can't hear, so let's not go into a noisy room, right? I can say that in this little user guide, and people can understand that, and I don't have to actually go through this process every time with every person and explain how to interact with me. And so user guides seem like a really awesome idea. I think this is a huge thing for teams where you really want to actually get everyone on the same page. There's a couple other things here, just a quick thing. The Strength Finder came from this book, First Break All the Rules. Originally, it was based on a Gallup poll. I love this book. This book is on my desk, and it's mandatory reading for anyone that works for me as a manager. It's that good. So, you know, if you're interested in management topics, it's really not a leadership book, it's a management book. Like, how best to work with people, have that empathy, and get the most out of them. But Strength Finder is a good thing. This nonviolent communication is not the idea that don't use words like, you know, phrases like kill two birds with one stone. Use instead feed two birds with one scone. Like, I've heard that, that's like a thing these days. That's not what nonviolent communication means. This is really about, you know, observing, understanding feelings, needs, and, you know,
Okay, so we can still use
Communicating.
the two birds and stone, right?
Yeah, well, in certain circles, I have some friends, I have some friends on the West Coast that don't like that, and they want the stone versus the stones, but like, personally, I don't care, but like, I think you do want to adapt to the people you're talking to and working with.
And incidentally, Austin has a Center for Nonviolent Communication, which is in Hyde Park.
What about him?
Right by this guy. I didn't realize that.
There's a meeting, there are meetings on Sundays which have gone, Austin has the longest standing practice meeting in the world. So it runs on Sundays from 1 to 3:30, and it runs on Monday nights from 7 to 9:15. We've done over 3,000 practice meetings.
So I knew that you were in empathy training, but I did not realize nonviolent communication. So this was not a plug for David.
Yeah.
Just to be 100% clear.
But that's it, good guy.
Yeah, so my final thought is around all of this, power dynamics matter, right? So if you're the leader, realize you have this shadow, and if you're creating this lack of trust, none of this stuff will work. So leader especially has to lead by example and be in front of this. That's it. I think you're next.
I suppose so. So we really need to accelerate. So we'll do quick promise that we'll get over shortly. So talk about microservices. The biggest challenge in developing microservices to evolve a vocabulary, and you have to have common language which describes common concepts. And often what happens is you have too much diversity in communication. You have the same concept being described in different words, and you end up getting, you don't end up getting your requirements right. So how do you come up with a vocabulary with common understanding? So this session on event storming, this was by Albert Brandolini. So he's the author of this particular book. So what you do is to evolve this, or to tease out these what we call as bounded contexts, where you have a separate vocabulary which describes one concept very correctly with the same language and communicate it down the line to everyone, so that everyone is on the same page, is by having an event storming kind of session. So you gather everyone in the room if you have a fairly complex business, you catch hold of everyone, gather them in the room, and you have orange stickies to describe events, and arrange the events from left to right in a time sequence, in a time series. So in this, what's going to happen is that some of the events, the people in the room would not agree that X follows Y. For example, in our company, there was an event such as raising a purchase order. Normally, on the timeline, it is first you have a quotation and then you raise a purchase order, right? But then there was a discussion that most of the times in our company, it was like when the vendor came for payment, then he was asked, where is the purchase order? And then he would say, okay, to raise the purchase order, I have to give a quotation. So it was actually a reverse flow in reality, though logically the flow should have been in a particular. So what is important here is when you have such anomalies, you put a red colored or a scarlet sticky that you see here, and you have number of these scarlet stickies. So what is important is not identifying these anomalies, but the conversations that you have around these, and these conversations help you to evolve the vocabulary, and also to understand what are the bottlenecks in the flow from left to right as the events go. So conversations and voting to identify the bottlenecks. The final outcome of this, so I'll quickly go to the final outcome, is having each bounded context, which is a particular concept where you have a unit of language consistency. So you speak the same language, a unit of purpose, that the entire bounded context is doing one thing, like a department or a section of a company.
That's for
and unit of
microservices.
responsibility.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That's like a microservices.
No, for understanding how to develop microservice, you have to separate out these bounded contexts. So this is like the design stage before building the microservice.
The point of a microservice is you've found out that multiple groups are going to be using the same service. It doesn't get invented within the development team for that particular, like accounting or sales. So therefore, since accounting looks at a given term differently than sales, you better make darn well sure that you both
But you know,
agree.
it's a great point, because it's a microservice for a company. It's a micro piece of what that company does, let's say. And then when you get into the development, yes.
So that's exactly the reason why you have the entire company in the room, all representatives, account sales, everyone, and then they finally evolve a vocabulary that is commonly understood
And
by
that's
everyone.
happening within certain industries like healthcare and finance.
Yeah.
Dun & Bradstreet, which is your town, is doing that, and there's something called FIRE, which is the database's name, but a part of it. And when they had disagreements, they created code books. It was, okay, let's at least tell what you used as a dictionary.
Right, exactly, like data element dictionary,
Yeah.
which is the common understanding across.
That's a concept
Yeah,
that
yeah.
people are understanding.
Yeah.
So I would say you have a bounded context, and a bounded context, an example of that might be a microservice, right?
No, bounded context is something where an example of that could be the process of releasing a purchase order as opposed to the process of receiving a quotation, right? Now these two are, like, one is happening as a front end with a vendor interaction where vendor is giving you a quotation. So that is a bounded context, and there's a whole process around that. So the vocabulary, the terms that you use there are different from the purchasing department where the purchase order is being raised. So these are typical, like you should visualize these as in a physical office. These are different sections of people, and then they have their own lingo in which they communicate with each other. And that's the vocabulary that is not understood outside of that group. The idea here is to have common ground in which everybody understands that vocabulary so that it can be communicated well across the company.
Yes, I was just giving example by using her example in this
Yeah.
general umbrella.
I
Like
got
hers is more of a
confused
specific,
because-
that's more general.
It says arguably one of the most difficult microservices pattern to apply and implement is the bounded context, and so that's what I was thinking, bounded context was microservice. It was the one that's like the same structure. It's not-
I'm not quite sure, so let's take it offline, let's talk about it later in the interest of time. These bounded contexts communicate with each other, the data is passed using events as the connectors between different bounded contexts, so that's the takeaway here. So you tease out these bounded contexts and the vocabulary, and you have these events communicating with each other. So there are a number of steps in between which I have not talked about. And with this, finally what you do is, how you build a microservice is, how you design it is by having a hexagon kind of visualization where everything is external to the business logic. So to keep purity in your business, so whatever is your business logic should not get mixed with, so it is stateless, it should not have dependencies. So all the dependencies are externalized, and you just have the core domain inside this. So that's why the hexagon serves better than the traditional layered model, where you have database at the bottom layer, then you have middleware, then you have the UI and the UX and all that. So instead of that, you have a hexagon as a better visualization of this. So everything is external. You can see outgoing email, persistence, which means the database layer, the text messaging and all that, then the user interface in terms of web or mobile or whatever. Everything is external, and you have the core domain, which is stateless, that is in the center. So there are a lot of these concepts that we covered. So I skipped them for now in the interest of time. This is again the representation of the same concept, externalizing dependencies. Yeah, this I'll let pass on to Florence.
Yes,
for
thank you.
Agile under pressure.
Agile under pressure, thanks
Yeah.
Vinay.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna do this within 2 minutes.
You are under pressure.
Under pressure, yes. So they took two years to develop this product. This talk was about 2 hours long, and I'm gonna try and cover this under 2 minutes. So as you can see, we have some really good tools in terms of architecture to help us visualize with the hexagon architecture, et cetera. And what this team did was, Barco is a company in Belgium. They hired a company in Belgium called In the Pocket to develop this product, which is a medical device. It has a imaging device, a cloud component, and web platform. They were developing 4 different toolkits. Complex. They spent a lot of time aligning, a lot of conversations, a lot of user validations with pictures, with the end users, early on in the process, almost like a design sprint separate. They improved, this was my example of going from a image that looks great to one that is relevant to the user base. Dermatologists, this doesn't make sense to dermatologists, this makes more sense. And they brought in, again, the design track into the development tracks. They interspersed them together. And they had challenges along the way, and they tackled them through conversation and communication, and incorporating context, demos and sales pitches, talk about sales. They come in and kind of mess our product roadmap, but through communication and really understanding all these important dates that are coming up, you can tackle them. And finally, estimates were off by a factor of 10. It happens, as it happened to, okay. Whew, not just that.
You jumped over ruthless prioritization.
That's right. And it's possible if you make it transparent by telling everyone what you're going to do. So with that, I'm going to actively listen to your customers and act upon it. And it's never too late to change priorities and go straight to number 11, forecasting.
I don't know if I can do this in 2 minutes.
We'll send out
but I will do it
slides.
as fast as reasonably possible.
Is it
So,
gonna be on the meetup thing? Or the metric?
Jill will send out all the slides via email. What's that? Yes, and the video, it's live streaming, and there'll be a video.
so for context, this is the second to the last topic, and the last one is quick, guaranteed. This one will go pretty fast. So the whole goal of forecasting is to do better than you did the last time, but also realizing you're never going to get it, right? Like models are never perfect. Don't try to be perfect. Try to be better. So forecasting using Monte Carlo is the topic here. I'll talk more about what that is, but really it's probabilistic based forecasting, where you simulate what could possibly happen a whole bunch of times, and then use that to figure out what's the likely outcome. If you go the traditional method of let's take our throughput, our average throughput, and then multiply it by a number of things we have to get done, you're gonna only have 50% probability, right? Because you've actually planned to the middle, right? So 50% of the time you're gonna fail, and 50% of the time you're gonna succeed, assuming that nothing bad happens, right? So it's a coin flip. So that's probably not good enough. So using historical data and feeding a tool like this Monte Carlo simulator, you actually don't have to get that much data in order to start getting much more accurate probabilities. 11 samples gets you the most bang for the buck. Going over that doesn't really get you much more benefit. And what they found is 7 samples is really good enough, right? So if you can get, yes?
Sorry, I think I missed something really fundamental. What do you try to forecast?
Releases.
Anything.
What about releases? Like
Like,
time
how many
for
sprints do we need in order to complete this project?
release? Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's a good feedback, actually. That wasn't clear, and especially in the condensed version of this, that's even less clear.
Yeah, thank you.
So you're basically, yeah, it's, what's the date? When are you gonna get this stuff done? Here's a pile of stuff. How long is it gonna take you to do it, right? We do our best, but it's difficult. This is an unsolvable problem. It's like maybe NP complete if you're into nerdy software stuff. But we can try to, like with those problems, try to do the best we can. So you don't need a lot of samples. You do need historical data. That's the setup here. So here's the Monte Carlo simulator tool. This is available online. There's actually references to it here. This is like a big thing in Agile community right now. There was 6 or 7 talks related to this topic at Agile 2019. But here's the idea. 5,000 sample runs based on your data. You've input your, maybe the simple thing is you put your lowest throughput and your highest throughput, and then it actually just kind of randomly runs these simulations to figure out what your answer is. There is a way to put in your actual 7 data points. These were my last 7 throughputs. That's good enough. You don't have to cherry pick the data, just take your last 7. That gives you a better result because if you have 2 or 3 11s and 1 9 and 1 8, it's going to pick 11 more often and give you slightly higher accuracy, right? So if you have better, tighter variance. So over here you get the results, right? So 85% or better is considered high, you know, in statistics, considered high likelihood, right? So you want to strive for that green. Anything less than that, you're asking for trouble. Top reasons forecast fails. I think number 2 might be the first most important one because it actually affects the one ahead of it and the one below it, and possibly the last one, which is the leader doesn't like it. That's not the answer I wanted, so go back and think about it some more and then give me the answer I wanted, right? But you're never going to win in that situation. Like, that's a human problem that you can't win. Cognitive bias is just the idea that you're going to cherry pick data that gives you the outcome you think you want. Like, and a lot of times that's affected because you think the leaders are going to want a faster time, so let's take some data that's actually going to make it look better, right? So don't do that. Just use the last 7 pieces of data. The other ones are kind of obvious. This is the whole WIP question, right? Don't have too much work in progress because, you know, we know, like, if you're on an Austin road and there's too many cars on it, it's going to take you forever to get over the bridge. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. So that's WIP in action. And that's it.
Right, my time starts now.
We're distracted.
Right, so this was the experiment that the Chris Bailey was a keynote speaker who, all right, okay, so you're
Actually gonna start the timer.
yeah, she's actually gonna start the timer.
You had it going.
Yeah, had it going, yeah.
Yeah.
So Chris
USB
Bailey
interface.
was the keynote speaker who conducted all these experiments, like I mentioned, like living in isolation, working 90-hour weeks, watching Netflix for 1 month, right? Gaining 15 pounds of muscle, etc. So, you know, what he is trying to do here is to get focus, right? How not to get distracted and how to get focus. So he was trying to do everything possible, and you know, he studied how human mind gets distracted. So his conclusions are like, you know, our mind craves distraction every 40 seconds. So that's when you look at your mobile phone and look at the notifications. It gives you a dopamine hit. But the next conclusion is that when he did the experiment, when he got bored, and you know, so those experiments showed that brilliant plans and ideas come when your mind is wandering, when you have nothing specific, and you know, so when your energy is low, that's when brilliant ideas come. When your energy is high, that's when execution happens. Mind wanders 40% of the times in future, 12% in past, 28% in present, and 12% of the time your mind is blank. And distraction isn't the main enemy of focus. It is the overstimulation that after you get distracted by that beep on your phone, you go and start chatting on WhatsApp with your friend, and that gets you stimulated, that, you know, keeps you awake. So yeah, that's it. So these are the insights we gained in this session. Thank you. And with that, I think, thanks a lot. We know the takeaways.
Yeah, we'll stop here.
Okay. Just a real quick reminder, this was recorded, live streamed, and so you can go check out the recording at Capital Factory's YouTube site. I will send this out, but not till Monday, because we still want to tweak it based on tomorrow's feedback. And there's a couple little capitalization things that are just bugging me I have to fix before I send it out. And then we also are gonna have a webinar on this same topic, condensed down to 1 hour.
Yes.
Yeah, right. But you'll receive an email on that, or if you wanna forward it to anybody. But I'd like to really thank Florence and Vinayak and Mike. They put a lot of effort into this weekend, because we just got back Friday night. And to deliver it starting on Tuesday was a lot of effort, so thank you very much.
None of the striking part.
If you can't wait till Monday, email one of us, tweet at one of us, we can answer questions. How do we get on our mailing list? Dr. Jill, marketing, she wants to get on our mailing list.
Maybe it was and so we're trying to be.
Hi, John. Nice to meet you. Appreciate it. Good. Maybe, yes. I've been in Houston. I was at Halliburton for
Oh, okay.
3 years.
Yes, you John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I'm in Austin with Connor.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, brand new
Exchange
change.
emails, you.
Yeah.
Did you talk to him?
Yes, I have. Yeah. We've talked.